Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So one of my favorite subjects to talk about is leadership, and I train people on leadership a lot. It's been probably the largest piece of my career for the last 10 years. And over that time, there are some truths that come up, and I will have a thumbnail on the video that you can look at and kind of write some of these things down. But if you want to take notes during the video, feel free, because we're going to talk a little bit about leadership for the next 10 minutes and what I think people don't focus on or don't know about, okay, with what makes leadership hard. So there are countless books in the world about leadership. This Leadership Challenge book was given to me as a gift by James M. Hughes and Barry Posner, and I'll tell you, it's an international bestseller. It has a lot of content around leadership. It definitely goes through different subject matter. It talks about psychological cues, workplace cues, different things you can look at and study specifically. And each one of those subjects we could do a video on here on this channel. What I've been used for in the past a good bit is team turnarounds and company turnarounds. And in those situations, team engagement and buy-in has to be there for you to be successful. It has to be part of what you're doing. So let's talk about 10 harsh truths about leadership. The number one that I would want to say and highlight is leadership is very lonely, okay? It's a very lonely place. So let's say you are a GM or a facility administrator or something like that, where you manage and run one location. And in that location, you may have 2 employees, you may have 50 employees, you may have 200 employees. In that whole group of people, you're the only one that will find yourself making tough decisions by yourself. Everyone else has counterparts that they can go back and forth on. And if you're in some structure that is matrix type organization or, multi-level organization where you have a vice president, you have a, director, you have above a director, a vice president, a president, and then you have a CEO and the C-suite you report to. Leadership can become a tough place. If the company is toxic in some ways, it may be that outside of you, you have to protect your team from everyone above you, just because they think the way you cut spending is to impact team one way or the other, or they don't allow you to hire what you need to hire, or you can't up pay rates as often as you need to up them to keep the team. Then you get in this rotating door of keeping people because you're not financially relevant for your teammates, for where you live, because there's so much participation in deciding how to increase wages. At the end of the day, people will see that you're the problem with that, even though structurally you can't do anything, your hands are tied. That's something that comes back, and your team, on the other hand, will always betray you. So no matter how close you are, no matter how much your workplace is a family, as everyone likes to say, what did Jesus teach us about leadership? Jesus came and led the world. He had a group of people that were very close to him that helped him do it. One of them betrayed him. As this one betrayed him, the others should have protected him were asleep. And he was betrayed and hung on a cross, right? They put him on a tree. And the very people that were celebrating him 1 week in different company were putting him to death. So think about that. If there's been any example of how that goes, you can look at Jesus, then you can look at Gandhi, then you can look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You can go through history and you can see what happened to significant great leaders, okay? With the exception of Jesus Christ, who rose and came, was all powerful and beat death, everyone else after that, their life came to an end because they were trying to do what was right, and they were ahead of their time, or they were outside of an area that was safe for them. So just think about that. So leadership is a lonely place. And when you're doing that, the people that are supposed to have your best interest in mind often will not. They're wanting to self-promote. So I'll tell you about a position where I tried to get into the role for a very long time. I ultimately ended up moving to a different place and building the plant with the idea of I was going to retire from that job. Was in the role for about 4 or 5 years, and it became known that I could turn places around. And then I had a boss who was talking to my subordinates about taking over my role because he wanted to put me on the road because that protected him. And made all these promises, everything else. Long story short, he got fired soon after I took the road job. So I was supposed to be able to go back and have the career that I wanted after fixing all these broken things. And was not able to do that because once I went on the road, that company ultimately wanted me to continue to stay on the road, and that was a trash lifestyle. I couldn't do anything. I was never home. So ultimately, I had to leave that company because I could no longer even live my life. I was on the road 10 weeks straight. One period of time was 10 months straight, and then come home for 4 months. So the company did not care about me at all, and did not care about my quality of life at all. So ultimately, I had to leave a position that paid me very well, but that it was a role that I didn't want to be in. It was a role that I was in just because I was successful at all these things, which I enjoyed that, and I did enjoy the success, and I did get great fulfillment from turning these locations around and being, celebrated by those teams who thought those obstacles were insurmountable before I got there. But at the end of the day, it cost me what I'd been working for 5 or 6 years because of this one selfish person who plotted around that to suit themselves better than what was there. So just know leadership is lonely, and you'll often do things, even if you're successful, will put you in a far further place where you'll be even more alone, and there's nobody on your side. So you need to know that. And if you're in leadership, you have to have the Constitution that allows you to do that, okay? And we've talked about that many, many times. I say, if you come from an area of faith, I'm a Christian. If you come from an area of faith, that helps because you know that this is just temporary and your rewards are coming later. So you can basically shoulder suffering better than most. But that being alone on top of that makes it very difficult sometimes. So that's the first one. Next is not everyone will like you, and that's okay. Focus on respect, not popularity. That's the truth of leadership. The betrayal piece that I talked about is people will be nice to your face, but as soon as you leave a room, people do that about everyone. I think it's just harsher about leaders because people can join teams to then be against that leader. And even if you have a unified team, there'll be companies that specifically target your teams because they know that the more unified the team is, the more likely that they will be, unified in everything, which makes it difficult for people to micromanage you and micromanage your teams if you do that. So what they'll do is they'll try to fracture your team and turn those folks against each other. So they, exactly what our government does to governments around the world, that's what these corporations now mimic in a lot of ways, especially over the last 5 or 6 years. So not everyone will like you. Number 3 is failure is inevitable. Learn from it and keep moving forward. When you become a leader of people and of things, what makes you successful is not just the wins. What makes you successful is that you get better with the losses, meaning you learn from them. You look back and you take down how you responded and you take down how your team responded. So then you can discuss it and then everybody gets better. And so the next time you face the same obstacle, you beat it and you move further. That's the kind of thought process. Is failure is inevitable and failing forward is necessary. There's a good book about failing forward. I think I've talked about it on this channel before on a different video. It's by John C. Maxwell. It's called Failing Forward. And in that specifically, you are trying to teach people that failing is good. There's that book right there, Failing Forward. Failure is fine as long as you learn from it. What you want to do is you don't ever want to have the same failure twice. So if you do have some failure at some point, you want to learn from it, but moving forward makes decisions that's going to lead you around that. Or if you've learned more through the process, then you should be able to work through it and not have the same issue moving forward. So that's number 3, failure is inevitable. If you have a toxic leadership above you, they will use those failures to try to put on you as what you've done as a shortcoming, not knowing the knowledge that came from it or the future wins that came from it. So just know that anything that allows you to grow will be something that someone uses against you at some point in if you're in a toxic workplace in a review type process, because what they want to do is try to keep you low. And I'm saying this to the leaders who are in the role right now. They want to keep you low. They always say things like, I had a boss one time that was like, talk to me about ego. Everything I said was our team, what our guys are doing, we're this, we're that. I was talking about the team, and the diminutive human being kept coming back to me about, well, that's ego. It's not ego. If you're having this success, it's not. It's saying we should take this success, find the best practices, and mimic that everywhere and put those things into place so everybody can have the same success. To which that one person was like, oh, so you know things better. And ultimately, I got to the point where I didn't talk to the guy. and he was ultimately fired and went away. But the point is, you're always going to have people that can take the positive and turn it to negative and don't see the growth that comes from failures. So just be used to that. And then the next one here, number 4, is success doesn't come overnight. It takes time, dedication, and perseverance. And it's just what I just said, through identifying best practices, sustaining those, having the team learn from those, and move forward. That's how you do that. And it does take time. But as a leader, some of that time period, you may have a limit to your endurance. So you need to know that it doesn't come overnight. You need to have in your mind a time period. So always have a 30, 60, 90. So I'll have a plan for 30 days. I'll have a plan for 60 days. And I'll have a plan for 90 days. And I'll have a plan where those things should be. If you're making the decisions and you're able to use those plans structurally, and you're able to use your best practices and learn from your failures, then you should show improvement, marked improvement quarterly. If you're not allowed to do your own decision making, if you're not allowed to do things the way you see fit based on what the model's telling you should do, then that success is going to be further down the road. And then you have to be aware of that in some places you're limited based on the success you had. I've had a role, and talked about it on here before, about toxic leadership, where the person would not allow their leaders to make decisions and force them to make certain decisions, and then a quarter down the road then wanted to grade those people on those decisions and the performance that came from those decisions as if it was theirs. So in those environments, you got somebody that's hamstringing you and then blames you for the fact that they're hamstringing you. It's awful. Now that person, since that company has been fired, but they turned over 16 or 20 different leaders while I was there in that period of time. And I just watched them run through all these good people. I'm like, so you think you're smarter than all these people? And the company basically supported that because they allowed him to keep burning all these good people. And so just know that that's going to happen. And in those situations, all you can do is, number 5, is lead by example. Your actions speak louder than your words. Don't get an engagement going back and forth with toxic people. Don't worry about it. Don't care about their opinion. Ultimately, the only things you can control is how you respond to things. So by doing that, responding in a cool manner, an intelligible manner, will be something that people want to replicate. They like that calm. It makes them feel safe. And once you make people feel safe, that's when psychological safety comes in, and they feel like the workplace is a safe place for them to come and put their best foot forward. If you have that there, and people aren't afraid of failing because they know that learning is going to be taken from it and they're expected to grow in that way, then you're going to create a place that's going to start having successes because you put all those pieces in place. Obviously, the things I've talked negatively about before on this video, if those things are in place, that won't happen. You won't be able to create a place like that because there will always be someone trying to split you apart. In the modern world, they call those people, they're not called HR anymore. In the modern world, people will have a people services team or something like that they will send in. These people don't serve anyone but themselves. They try to separate the team out by segments, divide and conquer, as we've said in other videos, and they try to crack the unity of the team because they don't understand that unity, and the team got that from going through tough things together. They don't understand that unity is important to success in the area. So you got to think, if you're serving customers, the more unified that team is into the final goal of serving that customer the best way, that's the best product you can put out. And so if your company is internally damaging that, you need to pay attention to those things and understand why they're doing it. And then ultimately, as a leader, if you're not able to have the success and the impact you want because people don't listen to you, then you need to go somewhere else where people will listen to you. And that's one of the things I like about consulting is you may work for a vast array of companies, right? You may work for, Tuesday may look completely different than Monday because you're dealing with a restaurant on Monday, and on Tuesday you're dealing with a bookstore. The challenges that they see are extremely diverse, but ultimately they're all trying to serve an end user or a customer. So those things that are successful at one will be successful at the other. But in that, you have to lead by example, and those traits that make people feel welcome and appreciated at one place are going to make them feel welcome and appreciated at another. So the next one on here, number 6, is know is your superpower. Not every battle is worth fighting. Focus on what truly matters. Now, I was saying about consulting, what I like about that is I tell people, hey, this is what I would do. You make your decision. I'm not a decision maker in this situation. I'm a consultant. I'm telling you, here's what your options are that are good options, and then they pick to do something on their own. Sometimes people just don't learn. Sometimes you can say you need to do this, this, and this, and they don't do it. It is what it is. They decided that. Ultimately, if it comes back to a performance situation, they come back to you and say, hey, we didn't have this level of success on this day. You can say, well, I told you to do this and this going into it. You did not. So in doing that, you limited the success that this was going to have going through that. We were still successful to this measure, but maybe next time you listen to what I say and we see if we can't capitalize on this measure. And that's how you handle that as a consultant. As a teammate or as an employee, you ultimately are going to have to work with the team and they're going to do what they do. So for example, in one location, it was understood when I came on that I would control all contracts and I would control all hiring. Because if I'm controlling the contracts, then we're not making bad decisions. If I'm controlling the hiring, then we're making the decisions around hiring the right people, so we're never in that place again. So every hire is another step forward. And then you go in and they say, well, this day we've hired this person. Well, I didn't choose this person, so that's okay. You said that you wanted this, but you just hired this. So therefore, the next few months, we're not going to get as far as we expected to because of whatever. And I've seen that happen many, many times. There was one place in South Carolina that did that. And the person kept hiring the same type individual, but then got angry because they had the same type of results. And I was like, you get what you pay for. So maybe pay a little bit more, not have the person turn over every 6 months and sustain the position. So you are going to have limitations in leadership to the way people choose to support you or to follow you. So just know that that's there. No is your superpower, though, so you need to pick your battles because you can't hold everything up. And ultimately, if you're limited by your company or by your organization, control how you respond to it. You can't control what's going to happen, so you just control how you respond to it and get the best result you can. Number 7 is feedback is essential. Feedback is essential even when it's hard to hear. My suggestion around feedback is having one-on-ones. You do that weekly or you do that monthly to support your team, and the more you do that, the better it gets. People become less fearful. Still keep that arm's length because they're your team and they have to report to you, but people feel less fearful about some hammer dropping because every couple of weeks you're saying, hey, you're doing well here, now try to fix these things. And by the end of the year, if you do that every week, you've got that person 52 different conversations away from where you started. So that means they've done all these things to improve along the way. And even if it's just a slight improvement of an inch a week, you're talking about feet and yards by the end of the year. And that's the way you have to think about it, is you just try to improve them a little bit. It's continuous improvement, small amounts daily. You sustain that over a long period of time, you end up having an impactful and enlightened team. So feedback is essential. It should be regular intervals. It shouldn't be feared. It should be responsive and communicative, and should be conversational to the point that the person is very comfortable in talking to you about that and feels confident in your belief in them, right? So everybody's a 10, you just got to get them there. And if they decide from some egregious error that they're not, then get them out of there as quickly as possible. But if you're still employed, if they're still employed with you tomorrow and they made it through the day, then you need to see them tomorrow as a 10 and you need to start that over, and that needs to be your process. Every day they show up, you want to be committed to making them better. Okay, that's number 7. Feedback is essential. Number 8 is conflict is part of the job. Address it constructively and seek resolution. You cannot be a leader if you have some conflict. Okay, conflict is as natural as breathing. Something's going to come up every single day. You need to be able to walk right into it, handle it quickly, put it quickly, take whatever learning from it you can, and move past it as quickly as possible. Anything that you don't address, you just approved. Okay, so if you're allowing people to treat each other poorly and you just allow it, that's a problem. You can't allow any of that. You have to handle it daily. So conflict is part of the job. Just manage it appropriately like you do any other process. It is what it is. Number 9 is your time is limited. Use it wisely and delegate whenever possible. Hire the right people, train them appropriately, and delegate everything you can to them. At the end of the day, by them doing more that's challenging to them, that they find rewarding, they may like the job more because of that. They may find a certain area based on what you delegate to them where they actually are extremely good. So you may never have to do that again. You just hand that off to them, create the role where they handle that for you, hire another person to do what they used to do, and now you're building a team that's more skilled that can do more impactful work. So you should look at that. Delegate because you want to champion your time. You want to do what you have the most impact doing, right? So 80% of your impact comes from 20% of your results. Whatever that 20% is, that's what you want to focus your time on. You want to delegate everything else to your team that you've trained and can handle it appropriately. So number 10, the last piece is self-care is non-negotiable. You can't lead effectively if you're burnt out. So I think that's a fine way to wrap this conversation up. if you're in a position where people don't care about you and you've been able to take your time off, I had a boss one time that was the toxic individual I've talked about numerous times. This person used to say, well, you're going to take your time off. I'm going to hold you accountable. But every time you took time off, they were calling and texting and would not let you have a day's break from anything. Your team would do everything you could to honor it. But this person was always that imbecile when it came to how to appropriately respect people's time. So just know that don't let words take the place of actuality. The self-care is non-negotiable. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take time off. You have to take time to refresh your endurance because of number one, leadership is lonely. And if you don't take the time to refresh yourself and to reclaim that endurance and to take a break from those things so you can recover and be your truest you, then you're going to give a lower performance. You're providing a lower product of leadership to your team, which then provides a lower product of quality to your customer. So you got to make sure that if you're a leader, that you understand what that means, that it's lonely, but you have to be specific and be dedicated to this deliberate way of thinking and acting. This is a great little thing. It'll be your thumbnail for this video. 10 harsh truths every leader needs to read. I'm Ben. Be good.